You are standing inside a Viking longhouse. Before your eyes, a stallion collapses. Flesh twists, bones reshape. Moments later, the horse is gone. Loki stands once again in divine form. Beside him rests Sleipnir, the greatest horse in Norse legend. No one gasps, no one looks away, no one calls it shameful. But if an ordinary Viking man was accused of crossing those same boundaries, he could lose his honor. His neighbors no longer speak to him. His wife cannot meet his eyes. His children are already paying the price. Everything he had spent a lifetime building could disappear because of a single accusation. 3 days after the accusation, he sat alone outside the assembly hall. By sunset, he would either kill another man or lose everything. His crime? No one could prove he had committed one. A single word had destroyed his life. Argr. How could the same civilization that celebrated a god like Loki destroy an ordinary man with a single word? To answer that question, we have to enter one of the darkest contradictions in Viking history. The surviving Norse myths repeatedly show gods crossing boundaries that ordinary people could never safely approach. Loki transformed between male and female forms. Odin practiced *Sirist, a type of magic closely associated with women. In the stories, these acts increased divine power rather than diminishing it. Among mortals, however, many historians argue the expectations were very different. Inside smoke-filled longhouses, storytellers recited Odin's mastery of *Sirist, and their listeners accepted it without question. Yet those same listeners could condemn an ordinary man accused of displaying similar behavior. For the gods, such acts could be sacred. For men, they could become socially catastrophic. The surviving Old Norse language reveals another striking pattern. Rather than describing male same-sex relationships in modern terms, much of the surviving vocabulary focused instead on status, honor, and masculine reputation. Many historians interpret this as evidence that Viking society was concerned less with desire itself than with the social meaning attached to particular roles. What remained unnamed was often left legally undefined. The surviving law codes reveal as much through what they omit as through what they record. No known Viking law explicitly prohibited sexual contact between men. Instead, the harshest stigma appears to have fallen upon the man believed to occupy the passive role. The act itself was not always the central issue. The perceived role within it determined everything. One man could preserve his standing, the other might lose it forever. Old Norse preserved several words for that loss. Argr, ergi, sorðinn. Although scholars continue to debate their exact meanings, they consistently point toward accusations of dishonor, humiliation, or the loss of accepted masculinity. A single word could erase an entire reputation. The same culture that celebrated Loki's transformations could publicly destroy a mortal accused of crossing similar boundaries. Whether this reflected deliberate social control or broader cultural values remains debated, but the contradiction appears repeatedly throughout Norse literature. The gods crossed worlds freely. Ordinary men measured every step they took. High above, Sleipnir carried Odin between the 9 realms. Far below, men lived with the knowledge that one accusation could end a life long before a sword ever did. If you enjoy exploring history's darkest contradictions, consider subscribing. Every week we uncover the forgotten customs, hidden beliefs, and uncomfortable truths that shaped civilizations far more than most history books ever admit. At the center of one Viking settlement stood a rune stone, rising from the earth like a public accusation carved into granite. Across its face was a single word, argr. To us, it looks almost harmless. To a Viking, it could destroy everything. According to the *Graugas law codes and several Icelandic sagas, a man accused of being *sorðinn, a term frequently linked with sexual dishonor, could challenge his accuser to combat. This was never a simple insult. It was an attack upon reputation, serious enough to demand blood. Honor formed the foundation of Viking society. Successful raids strengthened it. Prosperous harvests reinforced it. But one accusation of sexual humiliation could reduce years of earned respect to nothing. The law left only brutal choices: accept the insult or answer it with violence. The accusation itself became the wound. Proof often mattered less than reputation. Words could cut as deeply as iron. Many historians argue this imbalance helped preserve the existing social hierarchy by making masculine honor one of the most valuable forms of power a man possessed. The surviving sagas also contain accounts in which victorious warriors used accusations, and in some cases, threats of sexual humiliation, to reinforce conquest over defeated enemies. Nidhugg spoke of disgrace. Ragnarok suggested cowardice or effeminacy. Blóðrok implied softness or weakness, different words, one recurring anxiety. Men learned to police every gesture, every movement, every glance. Strength had to be performed constantly. Tenderness carried risks. Even simple displays of affection between men could invite suspicion in a culture where dominance shaped reputation. Winter evenings inside the Great Hall followed an unwritten choreography. Men shared ale across rough wooden benches while carefully respecting invisible boundaries. Laughter was welcomed when it projected confidence, less so when it suggested vulnerability. The law established the framework. Daily life enforced it. Even a false accusation could linger for years. A man's voice carried less authority. His opinions lost weight. Neighbors tolerated him without ever truly accepting him again. He walked among familiar faces, like a ghost of the man he had once been. The rune stone remained where it always had. Its inscription would survive long after the man it condemned. Morning frost settled across its carved letters, dulling their edges but never their meaning. The stone endured, the accusation endured, so did the fear. The morning sun stretched long shadows across the settlement as the accused remained seated outside the assembly hall. Villagers passed without acknowledging him, practicing the quiet blindness that protected them from sharing in his disgrace. Mothers pulled their children aside whenever they wandered too close, teaching invisible boundaries the children were still too young to understand. His accuser had hurled the word sorðinn like a spear, claiming the man had been sexually used during a recent raid. The accusation cut deeper than any blade. It did not simply wound his body, it redefined who he was. Women drew water from the well, their conversations falling silent the moment they noticed him. Merchants negotiated trade as if his presence no longer existed. Daily life flowed around him like water around a stone. Even his wife had not spoken to him since the accusation. Not necessarily because she believed it, because association alone carried consequences. Supporting the accused could become dangerous in its own right. He remained physically present while becoming socially absent, a living warning to everyone around him. In theory, he still possessed the legal right to challenge his accuser. In reality, few men would willingly witness a duel involving someone whose honor had already been called into question. Victory might change nothing. Defeat would confirm everything. No god would descend from the heavens to restore what had been lost. The same gods who crossed gender boundaries freely in myth offered no such protection to mortal men living under human law. Far from the village, another lesson unfolded. The deck of a Viking longship ran slick with seawater and blood as the raiders finished stripping a conquered settlement of its wealth. Yet silver arm rings and carved weapons were not the only trophies carried aboard. Imagine one such reconstruction. A captured chieftain, once the protector of his people, now knelt in the center of the ship while warriors surrounded him. His richly woven cloak had been ripped away, leaving him exposed to the freezing salt wind. His clothing had not been removed for comfort or necessity. It had been taken to erase status before the eyes of everyone watching. This was more than physical violence. Rope burns circled the chieftain's wrists. His posture had been forced into submission. His body itself became part of the demonstration. The arrangement spoke as loudly as any spoken threat. The raiding captain oversaw the scene with the same cold attention he gave to dividing silver and weapons. Dominance itself had become another prize of victory. The cold sea wind lashed across the deck while the captive struggled for breath, each shallow gasp disappearing into the icy air. Around him stood other prisoners. When the demonstration ended, the ship turned toward open water. Its sails snapped in the changing wind. Behind it remained more than a defeated village. It left behind fear. The chieftain stared blankly at the weathered planks beneath him. The emptiness in his eyes was, in this reconstruction, precisely what his captors hoped to create. not merely a defeated man, but a broken symbol. They had stripped away his identity, leaving behind only a shell that would carry their message back to his people. The raiding ship turned toward home, its hold filled not only with silver and plunder, but with living reminders of Viking victory. The broken captives would return to their villages as visible warnings. Their presence would speak more loudly than any threat ever could about the cost of resisting Viking power. Some historians argue that when sexual humiliation appeared in medieval accounts, its significance extended beyond the immediate victim. If such acts occurred as described, they could have served as long-term psychological domination over defeated communities. One broken leader became a warning to countless others. No divine power could restore what had been taken from the captured chieftain. The longship disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving behind changed men who carried the raiders' message wherever they went. What began as conquest had become memory. What began as violence had become reputation. While ordinary men paid the price for crossing masculine boundaries, the gods never did. Long before warriors used the body as a symbol of dominance, Norse mythology had already drawn a sharp line between what gods could do and what mortals dared attempt. Incense drifted through the sacred space as Odin knelt in robes associated with asterisk, the form of magic many surviving sources connect with women. His fingers traced symbols into the earth, while ancient words rose steadily from his lips. No one questioned the Allfather. No one accused him of dishonor. The same actions that could bring shame upon an ordinary man became signs of divine wisdom when performed by a god. According to several historians, this contradiction reveals one of the deepest paradoxes in Norse culture. A king seeking the wisdom of female seers could be praised for his foresight. The act remained the same, the person performing it changed everything. Authority always flowed downward, never upward. The scent of burning herbs filled the chamber as Odin completed his ritual. His transformation was temporary. His authority remained untouched. The same action could inspire reverence or condemnation, depending entirely upon who stood at its center. The myths offered no path from mortal limitation to divine freedom. The gods were not examples to imitate. They were exceptions impossible to become. What elevated the powerful could still destroy the powerless. The incense slowly faded, the boundary remained. Those who possessed ultimate authority crossed it freely. Those without authority often paid dearly for approaching it. The Viking obsession with masculine honor did not disappear overnight as Christianity spread across Scandinavia. Instead, many historians argue that older ideas blended with newer religious structures in complex ways. The vocabulary changed, the anxiety often remained. As Norse kingdoms converted under Christian kings, new religious language replaced many older terms, yet concerns surrounding masculinity, shame, and moral order continued to shape society. Where Norse law defended masculine honor through feud and public reputation, Christian teaching increasingly framed similar issues through confession, sin, and penance, different language, a different religious framework. Yet echoes of earlier social expectations remained. Sunlight filtered through stained glass onto the stone floor, where the accused knelt before church authority. His body still faced judgment, but the nature of that judgment had changed. The violation was no longer presented only as an offense against honor, it became an offense against God. The stakes expanded from earthly reputation to eternal salvation. Old words gradually disappeared. Argr gave way to terms like sodomite, ergi became abominations, neath became unnatural. Each new vocabulary carried its own consequences. Under earlier Norse law, an accused man might answer an insult through combat. Within the Christian moral framework, he was more often expected to confess, repent, and accept religious discipline. The whip fell with measured rhythm while silent monks observed to them. This was not punishment alone. It was correction. The body, they believed, could be disciplined in order to restore the soul. The flesh was being taught the lesson the soul was believed to have ignored. Every scar became a permanent reminder of the body's supposed capacity for sin and the spirit's need for discipline. One of Christianity's most significant changes was the expansion of condemnation itself. Where earlier Norse custom often focused on the passive participant in sexual encounters, later Christian teaching increasingly condemned all participants under a broader moral framework. The hierarchy of shame became universal guilt. Personal reputation gave way to spiritual accountability. Surveillance of masculine behavior grew more comprehensive. The monastery bells marked each passing hour while the punishment continued. Every strike upon flesh became another moment sanctified through suffering. The victim's pain was no longer framed as private humiliation. It became evidence of divine justice. His body had become a battlefield where religious authority sought to restore what it believed was moral order. Beneath the new language, familiar ideas endured: to receive, to yield, to appear soft. These qualities continued to be treated as violations of accepted masculinity. Only now, many theologians argued, they threatened not merely social standing but the soul itself. What had once brought public disgrace was increasingly described as spiritual corruption capable of spreading through an entire community unless confessed, corrected, and contained. Hot wax dripped from the altar candles onto the cold stone floor, forming pale pools that hardened within moments. The victim's blood followed much the same pattern. The visible wounds would eventually fade. The lesson was meant to remain. Religious authority gave the system a new kind of efficiency. Instead of relying upon public accusations that might end in combat, it increasingly depended upon confession, repentance, and institutional discipline. The church could demand admissions that earlier legal systems had often left unspoken. Incense drifted through the chapel, mixing with the metallic scent of blood as the prescribed correction finally came to an end. The victim was released to tend his wounds and reflect upon the connection between physical suffering and spiritual purification. He had not merely been declared shameful, he had been declared sinful. The transformation was linguistic as much as legal. Dishonor depended upon public opinion, sin depended upon divine judgment. One belonged to society, the other reached into eternity. The monastery gradually returned to silence as afternoon prayers began. The punishment had ended, the memory would not. Scarred flesh and lasting trauma carried the lesson forward. The vocabulary had changed, the fear remained. Although Christianity introduced a fundamentally different religious worldview, certain older anxieties surrounding masculinity and social order continued in new forms, different scripture, similar patterns of control. The bells continued to ring, institutions continued to function. Human bodies continued to bear the consequences. Authority had adopted a different vocabulary. The mechanisms of discipline had discovered a new source of legitimacy. The outcome often looked remarkably familiar. Centuries passed. The gods who once embodied these contradictions faded into myth. The crosses that once sanctified suffering became ordinary symbols. Yet many scholars argue that expectations surrounding masculinity continued to evolve rather than disappear. No longer confined to temples or monasteries, they surfaced in schools, legal systems, medical theories, popular jokes, and countless everyday interactions. Where men were expected to remain dominant, the methods changed. Open punishment became less common, silence, ridicule, social exclusion. These increasingly became the tools of enforcement. The system no longer depended solely upon priests or warriors. Habit could accomplish the same work. In Viking halls, men carefully measured their behavior. Within Christian monasteries, discipline took different forms. The posture remained familiar, the anxiety endured. Only the justification had changed. Stone inscriptions became parchment. Parchment became printed law. Printed law became medical diagnosis. Medical diagnosis became digital conversation. The medium evolved, the underlying concern often survived. The male body perceived as yielding, receiving, or failing to meet expected ideals of masculinity continued to move through history beneath changing vocabularies. Words like *argr and *ergi slowly disappeared into historical texts. Later legal language adopted terms such as *sodomy and *abomination. Modern medicine introduced ideas of pathology and disorder. Each era developed its own language for behavior that challenged prevailing expectations of masculinity. Many historians see this continuity not as a single unbroken system, but as recurring attempts by different societies to define and police gender boundaries. The labels changed, the boundary remained. Contemporary insults still echo much older anxieties. Medieval accusations carried traces of earlier Norse concepts. Across centuries, the language evolved while certain patterns of shame repeatedly resurfaced. The body was interpreted by institutions rather than by the individual. It was classified, diagnosed, legislated, condemned, excluded. Its meaning was repeatedly assigned by authorities rather than chosen by the person living within it. The thread connecting these historical moments was not identical belief. It was repetition. Most people in any generation could not fully explain why particular behaviors provoked such powerful reactions. They simply inherited the expectations around them. Understanding was unnecessary. Participation was enough. Modern legal protections now exist alongside older cultural anxieties. Inclusive language often exists beside deeply rooted assumptions. Progress and prejudice sometimes occupy the same society at the same time. The mechanisms adapt, the vocabulary changes, yet many responses continue almost automatically. A gesture considered too feminine, a posture interpreted as weakness, a failure to display expected masculine confidence. These signals can still provoke reactions that many people struggle to explain, even while instinctively responding to them. That is why many historians see this story as extending beyond one civilization or one religion. It is not simply about Vikings or Christianity. It is about recurring patterns through which societies define acceptable masculinity. The gods who crossed boundaries remain safely inside mythology. Ordinary people who crossed similar boundaries often faced very different consequences. The distance between divine freedom and human expectation narrowed in some eras and widened in others, but it never disappeared entirely. 21st century lives still carry the weight of ideas that began long before Christianity, long before medieval kingdoms, and long before written law. The thread was never entirely broken. It was woven into new institutions, playgrounds, family dinners, social media, legislation, entertainment, different vocabulary, many of the same expectations. The mechanisms continue to evolve. People continue to live with their consequences. History is not only something behind us, its echoes remain very much alive.